If I have learned anything about human behavior from being a therapist, it is that it is almost never a one-time thing. So if that behavior bothers you now and it really, really bothers you, ask yourself, will this bother me if this behavior doesn't go away? If the answer is yes, that might be useful to set a boundary around. Okay, hi everybody. Same shirt, same day. Actually, that's a fun secret for you if you didn't know. We batch film everything, so I'm just really letting the cat out of the bag. We are back to talk about boundaries part 2. In this video, we're going to talk about some specific examples for boundary setting, areas in your life in which boundaries might be useful, boundary violation consequences, and all of that stuff. If you have not watched part 1, I will put a card in the thing up here somewhere. Go watch that first because there's a lot of really important and useful information there before we get into actually how to set boundaries. But if you've already watched part 1 and you're watching part 2, thanks. Also, hi, welcome back. So let's talk about boundary setting and some examples and all of this stuff. I have a couple reflection questions that I think are useful in terms of boundary setting that I wanted to pass along to y'all. So the first question that's important to ask yourself is, how do I feel I deserve to be treated? This is kind of like an amorphous question. I realize that. However, the whole goal behind boundary setting is, again, to implement some framework to keep you safe and feeling valued and respected in your relationships. So when we're talking about setting boundaries, it's useful to ask yourself, well, how do I want to be treated? How do I want to feel in my relationships? What do I want my relationships to look like? And especially to think long term, because typically there's this thought that occurs where, like, it's not that big of a deal. It was a one-time thing. I'm going to let it go. If I have learned anything about human behavior from being a therapist, it is that it is almost never a one-time thing. So if that behavior bothers you now and it really, really bothers you, ask yourself, will this bother me if this behavior doesn't go away? If the answer is yes, that might be useful to set a boundary around. That was like 18 different reflection questions, but like, whatever. It's fine. So the reason that I say it's important to have that reflection question and to ask yourself this is because with boundary setting, again, we are not here to control other people. Boundaries are not a way for us to manipulate others. However, it is useful as a jumping off point for communicating to the people we are in relationships with. This is the way I feel I deserve to be treated. I'm setting this boundary because I feel I deserve to be treated this way. The second question that I want to encourage you to ask yourself when you are approaching boundary setting is, what is my goal with setting this boundary? Because if you are setting a goal with your boundary that you want to punish somebody, that you want to hurt somebody's feelings, that you want to make them feel small because they made you feel small, you want to influence somebody else's behavior because you don't like the way that they're behaving and you want to force them to do something, fucking bad sign. Back it up, because that's not what we do. Boundary setting is, again, not intended to manipulate other people, but it is also not a way for you to get even and to hurt other people because they hurt your feelings. Boundary setting should be self-focused. So if your goal with setting a boundary is to impact somebody else, back it up. Reframe that and ask yourself the question, what's my goal with setting this boundary, and how can I redirect that goal to be about my own well-being and influencing my life, my feelings, myself? We don't want our boundary setting to come from a place of malice or frustration or anger. If that's the case, you need to sit with your shit and you need to do some feeling first before we approach the boundary setting conversation. So with that said, I think those are like 2 useful reflection questions. I'm not going to like give you guys fucking homework. So let's just like get into some examples of boundary setting. So with boundary setting, there are a lot of different areas of your life in which you can set boundaries. Some of the common ones tend to be family relationships, romantic relationships. Workplace boundaries is one that comes up a lot, but we can set boundaries around a lot of different things. So if we're talking about setting boundaries in your romantic relationship, typically those will be based around communication, you know, the way that your partner treats you, your love language, how you prefer to receive affection, all of those types of things. Those boundary setting goals tend to be a little bit easier in romantic relationships because usually we have that like very open and honest, hopefully, communication with your romantic partner. Some examples of boundaries in a relationship might look like, I didn't like the way that you communicated that. I would prefer that you communicate this differently. It hurts my feelings when you say X, Y, and Z. Please say something else instead. This tends to come up in the topic of conflict and disagreements because conflict is hard. And sometimes we communicate during conflict in a way that's maybe not reflective of our best selves. And so boundary setting can be really useful Because if you are a person who is like very emotional and gets like really like up to here easily, that's me, then your partner might want to set a boundary around like, I don't want to communicate with you until we've both had a chance to feel our feelings and come back down to a reasonable level. Boundary might look like, I need 5 minutes before you try to have a conversation with me. A boundary might look like, I need to have a conversation about this issue, within 30 minutes of it happening, or I want to resolve our conflicts before we go to bed, all of that type of stuff. And so again, those are conversations that you can have with your partner. Also, I want to encourage you with the boundary setting to be willing to offer some give and take, because boundary setting can very much be about compromise. If we are setting boundaries with someone who like loves us, is a safe person, and is willing to work with us, boundary setting with toxic people, unsafe people, abusive people is very different. And we will touch on that in a moment. But if you and your romantic partner feel safe, feel valued, and feel loved in that relationship, if you want to set some boundaries around how your relationship will function best and look best, then there can be room for give and take in terms of where those boundaries lie. So boundary setting with family is another one that comes up a lot. Typically, this is because there is like enmeshment or boundary issues, family wanting to be too involved, family wanting to be not involved enough. This comes up a lot around the topic of child rearing and like how involved or not involved you want your parents to be as a grandparent, that kind of stuff. Boundary setting with family can go either way, because sometimes we have very healthy, happy, safe relationships with our family of origin. Sometimes those relationships are abusive and unsafe and kind of scary. So please, understand this is an area where, all of this whole goddamn channel is an area where I don't know you specifically. I can't speak on your situation. So again, take all of this with a grain of salt, but also adapt the stuff that I'm giving you to fit your situation. When we are setting boundaries with people who are maybe abusive or toxic or a little bit scary, those boundary settings tend to be a little bit more firm, and you really want to draw that line in the sand in a very clear and concise way and stick to that and like really hold your ground on that boundary. Because if you are setting a boundary because someone is being over involved in your life and you kind of relax that boundary a little bit and you let them in a little bit more, again, this is the conversation that we had in the last video, that the behaviors that we allow are the behaviors we encourage. So if you are wanting to set that firm boundary with someone, stick to your guns and like really keep that line in the sand. Some of these boundaries might look like, I can't answer every phone call or every text message. I'm not available to come over to your house for dinner. You can't show up at my house uninvited. You are not entitled to all of the information about my life. I will only share things with you that feel safe to me, etc., etc. There are lots of different boundaries that we can set with family members. Again, boundary setting can look very different with your family system. It depends on what works best for you, if these people are safe or unsafe. And again, take this advice and like use what works and leave the rest. But some examples for consequences with boundary setting. These are really important, especially with people who are like maybe toxic and unsafe. So let's talk about that. Boundary consequences, again, if you watched part 1, you will already know this, but consequences are kind of step 2 of the 2-step process in setting boundaries. We want to communicate the way that we feel we deserve to be treated, and also communicate how we will behave if that boundary is violated. Consequences to boundary setting with family or in your romantic relationship oftentimes are based around the idea of contact. So if you continue to call me a name that's disrespectful, I'm not going to contact you. If you continue to bother me about my weight or my diet, I'm not going to spend time with you. If you continue to try to show up at my house uninvited, I just won't open the door. If you blow up my phone and call me repeatedly because I didn't answer you, understand that I'm not going to answer. I won't return your voicemail, or maybe I'll block you, or I'll mute you on social media, or I will unfollow you, or I will block you from seeing my stories or interacting with my social media. All of these can be used in a way that are intended to prioritize your safety. And this is why I will continue to harp on the point that boundaries are not meant to control other people, because blocking someone on social media can very much be a way for us to try and hurt someone's feelings. And so again, I want to encourage you to do some reflecting before you do the consequence piece about why you're doing that. If you're blocking someone or you're removing someone because you genuinely feel unsafe, or you feel violated, or you feel it's an invasion of privacy, That's totally fair. If you are blocking someone or muting their phone calls or ignoring their contact because you want to hurt their feelings, maybe we have some more emotional processing to do, and I would encourage you to do that in therapy. So boundary setting, the last thing that I want to talk about is boundary setting as it relates to like work and our professional life and school even. A lot of times there's this perception that the busier we are, the more dedicated we are to work or school or like productivity, that we're like a better person for that. This is bullshit. Workplace boundaries, school boundaries, boundaries around productivity generally are very, very important because you are a human being. You are complex and wonderful and beautiful, and you have so much more value outside of your profession and your productivity. And so when we set these boundaries, we're communicating to our workplace or to our teachers or our professors that I am not just a productivity machine and I do not exist to please you and to meet your deadlines. We're also communicating to ourselves that I deserve time to rest, to spend time doing the activities that bring me joy. I deserve to be this fully fleshed out, complex human being who is not just a gear in a bullshit capitalist machine. So those boundary settings are, or those boundaries are very important, and the consequences for those are usually pretty simple. That like after 5 p.m., I am done working. I will not answer your emails when I am not clocked in. I am not available for you to pick up extra shifts unless I have the time, or like I will contact you if I want to pick up a shift, but I will, not respond to contact if you want me to pick up a shift. I will not work overtime. I will not work X amount of hours. I will not answer phone calls when I'm with my children. I will not work for you when I'm on vacation. All of these can be examples of appropriate workplace boundaries, and typically the consequence for those is just like, I'm not responding. I won't open the email. I won't return the phone call. Again, they're typically contact based, or like at 5:30 p.m., I'm gonna get up out of my chair and I'm gonna get the fuck out of this office. Those are all like appropriate and valid boundary violation consequences. The last thing that I want to hit on before we finish up is that sometimes the consequence for your boundary is purely to communicate how that affected you. This is kind of a gamble because, again, we don't necessarily want to lead with vulnerability with a person who is abusive or unsafe. But again, this is like useful in your romantic relationships, or if you have a safe family member or something like that. Sometimes the consequence for our boundary is just communicating, wow, that really hurt my feelings. That made me feel like shit about myself. When you say those things, it brings up X, Y, and Z for me, and I really don't like that. And it makes me scared to spend time with you, or it makes me really hesitant to open up to you again. Please don't say things like that. Sometimes that consequence is the most impactful, because if we're having that conversation with someone who does truly love and care about you, that really hurts. Nobody wants to hear that we're making our loved ones feel like shit about themselves. And so sometimes that communication is a consequence in and of itself. I'm not even going to touch on that. So I know that this is a lot of information. If you guys have questions, comments, or concerns, please put them in the comments. I would love to chat with you guys about it. I know that this is kind of a complex issue. With that though, please understand that I can't give you guys specific advice in the comment section. There are a lot of ethical boundaries there that prevent me from speaking on your situation specifically. So I will do my best to give you broad strokes education, but I can't provide you with specific advice. Anyways, if you guys like the video, and subscribe to the channel so you can watch more fabulous videos like this, and then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.